Non-duality can be summed up in one line, which is we are all one. And it's a beautiful understanding that has so much potential for healing. But the challenge is to take this understanding from the head and from concepts and into our actions and way of being. Because embodying this understanding, walking the talk to the best of our human ability is, in my view, the most important part of spirituality. And in this video, I want to talk about how I see, or what I see is the best way to be able to do that. There are loads of videos on YouTube with titles like Instant Enlightenment or Ego Death Now. And I'm not saying that there's not value or important insights in videos like that. But the fact remains, we are all having a human experience and we are busy people in a busy society. If we're all really frenetic and we have a busy day at work and we get home at the end of that day and we're tired and your partner and you clash over some domestic duties, for example, one of you's promised to take out the rubbish but haven't done so, and you have a few crossed words and your conditioned nervous system kicks in, and then the kids are refusing to go to bed because they're not as up to speed on the non-dual understanding as you are. Who gives a shit if you're a thoughtless being in that situation or not? In fact, I'd wager there's absolutely no chance anyone would be, because that is the messiness of human experience. And that, in situations like that, that's where the rubber meets the road, not in sitting on a cushion in meditation. So who cares if you're able to sit on a platform passing down commandments from on high if you're not embodying this understanding in your life? So how do you actually do this? One way is by accepting and really embracing those moments when we are triggered. And we can easily be triggered by our partners, by our kids, by our colleagues, and of course, by our dear parents. Because as Ram Dass famously said, if you think you're enlightened, go and spend a week with them. But in those moments when we feel frustrated, where there is conflict, where we want to avoid, where we want to pull away, those are the moments when we can start to explore our shadow, what's going on under the surface, where we are living in alignment with the conditioning of our ego rather than this higher recognition that we do have a shared being. And it's about having a loving intention and bringing loving actions to these difficult moments, which is hard because we are messy and we do have conditioning. So it's not about being perfect, but it's about having that intention to be loving and trying to the best of our ability to act in accordance with that. And being loving does not mean being all cooey lovey with whoever we're with and letting them do whatever they want. Not at all. Loving actions could be things like setting boundaries, being clear about what is your pattern and your responsibility and what's theirs, and taking responsibility for yours, but not for someone else's issues. Helping where possible, of course, but not taking responsibility for it. It could mean taking responsibility for when we mess up and act in a way that is not in alignment with our or other people's highest good, which is invariably going to happen. Taking responsibility for when we mess up. It could mean recognizing when we're being arrogant and instead really embracing the fact that we are human beings. We are going to mess up. We do have conditioning and we have a responsibility and an opportunity to tidy the mess up a little bit before we pass the parcel on, so to speak. The real work is in those moments of conflict, of challenge, to let it show us where we're acting in alignment with our shadow, becoming more familiar with those shadow parts, cleaning them up a bit or embracing them a bit, and then acting in alignment with our highest good from moment to moment. I have a 2-year-old daughter who is effortlessly present and authentic. And it is hugely endearing. It's such a lovely and attractive way of being. People are so drawn to kids like that. She is unapologetically herself. She doesn't have expectations of other people. She doesn't demand they act in a certain way. She acts in alignment with her feelings. She is not manipulative in any way. She doesn't try and mold how people see her or what people think about her. She doesn't self-censor. Invariably, as we get older, we lose touch with that way of being that my 2-year-old expresses so effortlessly. I don't know any adults who are unapologetically themselves. who don't try and influence and even mildly manipulate how they're perceived by others, consciously or otherwise, and who don't have a little bit of an identity going on and perhaps wrestled with self-esteem at some point. It's inevitable we go through that process. And it can be quite a disquieting thing to go through. And lots of us end up feeling, to varying degrees, broken or flawed or in some way a bit of a wrong 'un. That was definitely true of me. And we can often go off on a pursuit to fix that. And that's why non-duality can be such a relief and so healing, because we see clearly that underneath the limiting concepts and ideas and beliefs and stories that the ego has laid down, we are still whole and complete and inherently lovable in exactly the same way as my 2-year-old daughter is right now. She's effortlessly that. We lose touch with that, but it never stops being true. We are that. We are all that. You, me, and everyone else. And that can be a huge relief. But then the challenge is, okay, we see that, we understand that. How do we live in accordance with that? And a process that I find to be really helpful is to recognize the stories that the ego makes up that keep us limited and small, the patterns that get laid down by the ego, the compensatory patterns that get laid down that might be things like being avoidant or being arrogant or being a know-all, whatever. There are so many ways it can get laid down. Really seeing those dysfunctional patterns for what they are, and then coming back in and getting in touch with our feelings. My 2-year-old is guided by her feelings moment to moment. She has this internal guidance. So she's, as I said, unapologetically herself. And we lose touch with that. We start to compromise and we start to think our way through life. But if we can get back in touch with our feelings, and the first step of that is to open to our feelings, because a lot of us resist feelings of fear or doubt or worry or sadness or anger. To open to our feelings without resistance. A lot of people talk about this, and it's absolutely a fundamental step. What we resist persists, etc. But I think you can actually go one step further, which is to open to our feelings, allow them to be there, sit with them, and then open to the intuitive wisdom within our feelings. Because our feelings can be a bit of an internal guidance. And I'm not talking about, oh, I'm angry, I'm going to lash out. Letting that settle, what's underneath that? And often, for example, in the case of anger, there'll be a sadness. And our sadness will show us where we are compromising in a certain way. Is coming to these difficult moments and trying to navigate our way through it by tuning into our intuition and acting in alignment with it. And then what I've noticed is our feelings will show us how well we've done that. If we feel light and if we feel a bit more free and if the overthinking dies down, that shows that we've acted in alignment with our highest good. As I said, we're going to get it wrong, but if our intention is there and we actually follow through on our actions, even when it's hard, that is, in my view, loving behavior. That is how we start to walk the talk of the non-dual understanding.